I'd like to just ask you to bow your heads, close your eyes, and we'll just say a word of prayer this morning. Okay, let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for being the unchangeable God that you are. Bless us today, be in this place, and that every song that is sung, every word that is spoken may be to your honor and your glory. Thank you, God, for loving us so unconditionally is my prayer. Amen.
Thank you, Gersey. Every once in a while you get double blessings. Double the blessing. And today is one of those days. So if you're here today for the first time, this is a great day for you because we have two guest people that are visiting us. And you'll hear about one of those a little down the track. But I'd like to introduce you to one person in particular, and it's important to me because I know her, and that's a good start. So I'll get Charmaine, who's all the way at the back there, and you can't miss her because she's wearing this bright pink dress. Come on down, Charmaine. And Charmaine is all the way from Nashville, but before I start telling you who she is, I'd like to ask her. Yeah, just grab her. Here. Got one? Yes. And we've got Chris right here. So, Charmaine, there's a lot of people here that do know you, but certainly there'll be one or two that don't know who you are. So maybe fill us in with where you're at the moment, where you live, and what it is that you do.
Okay, Jason Carrasco. I have been living in the United States of America for about 12 years. This will be my 12th year, I can't believe it. And I'm from Sydney, Australia. I grew up in a ministry called Endless Praise. I was the first child in our family, and I think so far the only to be born on the road. I was actually born in America on tour. And it's funny how God works because it's so easy for me to live and be in America because I'm an American citizen. It's great. I feel like a spy with two passports. But I'm working on my third album in the States, and that's the reason why I'm going home a little bit early so that I can start working on that.
And that was my next question, actually. So who are you working with at the moment, and what are some of the things that give us some insight into that process of writing some music and trying to come up with a new album. What's the inspiration, and so on and so on?
Well, writing an album, I don't know if some of you are musos, like to write. It's kind of like putting your heart in a diary, but that everybody reads. So it can be a little bit sensitive sometimes. You do write about experiences, and especially for me, everything that I've written thus far and that I write is always wrapped around God and His love and what that means in my life. And so, yeah, that's my inspiration, and that's the only reason why, I choose to be away from family and and the only reason why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. So have you written about breakups yet?
No. I
Okay.
refuse.
So see, that's where you're missing. You need to write about a breakup.
No, apparently.
People like to hear about breakups. We love reality TV. So if you can film it and write about it, that'll be great.
Okay.
There's YouTube now. So, Charmaine, what's your favorite part about the musical experience that you're living at the moment? What is something that maybe we are not aware of that you really, really love?
I actually really like meeting people after the concert. I do like doing music, and I do like performing and all that, but I really, really like to meet people, see where they are, hear their stories, just because it gives me the opportunity to encourage them. A lot of people, without knowing it, encourage me, and it just makes it real, because they're listening, and sometimes when you're in the studio recording and even on the road touring, you don't really get to see or meet the people that are just enjoying it for what it is. So.
Great. Now I'm going to do something here that we weren't anticipating, but I'm wondering how many of you know or have heard of Charmaine's music before? Just raise your hands very quickly. Okay, now I'm going to open it up to 2 questions today. If you think you have an interesting question that you'd like to ask Charmaine, give it to us. Put her on the spot. Make it really, really tricky. So any questions? Does someone have something that you'd like to ask that you've thought about before that you might want to get some insight into this morning?
Family. Keep your hands down.
We have one question at the back there.
Ooh. I toured with another lady. She's Australian as well. I toured with her for about 7 years, and she's fairly well known. And through her, I got to tour in Europe, and my favourite place was actually Romania, because we were the first concert that ever happened after Michael Jackson's Thriller tour. And so we had about 5,000 people come to a Christian show, and it's still a very kind of a poor country. They're still struggling to get on their feet. A lot of things going on spiritually that was we knew about, but you could just feel the heaviness almost, And I just remember singing, and I've never seen people soak up words and music as much as they did. And when Rebecca did her set, and at the end she made a call, and she doesn't usually do that. And we started singing praise and worship songs as she made the call, and it was something really simple. It wasn't even hyped up like emotionally or anything like that. And hundreds of kids came to the front. And we don't do that in concerts. Usually it's more entertaining and, you kind of give your message in between, but just to see how the Spirit moved and how these people were touched and God impressed them, that was my favorite experience.
So Romania. Okay, great. One more question.
My favorite type of music. Well, I'll answer it like this. I don't really like country. But I live in Nashville. I know it's terrible. And I don't really like... No, I like opera a little bit. So I like everything else. If it's a good song and a pretty melody, I'm all in. So.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for your questions. And I'm sure that you could stand at the back there later on and people can ask you more questions. Is that right?
Yeah, no worries.
Absolutely. Well, it's an honor to have you here today and a blessing. So I'll leave it in Charmaine's hands and she will take us through the next section.
Awesome. Well, it is such... I just love the fact that I am here with you guys, even just for a moment, to see my family members. And before we get started for this morning, let's just remember why we sing. Remember why we are here together. It's to encourage one another in this reality of who He is. That we can walk through life and in spite of what's going on, we can have peace. And this is why we sing. This is why we even do praise and worship. Because we're singing about somebody who's changed our lives.
Just a little while ago, our daughter, Kayla, asked whether you were famous, Charmaine. And Sidonia said, what does that mean? What does famous mean? And she goes, it means you're pretty. So I guess we could say that you're famous. Now, speaking of pretty, one of the things that I'm very excited about this year is taking place in September, and that's a men's fly and build. That is going to Nepal from September 2 to 14. And that is something that I'm very excited about, because a community of faith, a church, is not a place that is limited by four walls. A community of faith is a place and a people that are going into the world, extending the faith and love and hope that we find in Jesus Christ. That is what church is. And we've got a group of 14, possibly 15, so we can play rugby with the Nepalese, that are going out there. And I'm going to ask the gentlemen that are going out on this trip, if you could stand up where you are, please, so that the church can see you this morning. So if you're coming on our fly and build, if you could just stand up where you are, please. So just stay standing, because I just want to have a word of prayer with you guys. If you could just stay standing. So over this next little while, you're going to be hearing a little bit more about this trip. You're going to be seeing some visual things. There's going to be stuff that we've got a website now where you can make some donations and so on. But this is really where we want to see Myland being more and more a place that is beyond these walls, beyond the boundaries of this place where we come on Saturday mornings, but it actually a community of faith that is biblically serving and reaching out into the world. And so these guys are going to have a fantastic time in Nepal in September. We've got a lot of work to do between now and then, but it's really exciting. And I just want to ask that you can please just pray for this trip as we prepare. And in fact, just want to pray at this point. So please bow your heads. Father, just want to thank you so much for this group of guys that have given of themselves, given of their finances, Lord, that for a little while are leaving children and partners behind, and that we're preparing to go out to Nepal. We just want to ask for your blessing, Lord. We want to pray that you will guide, that you will lead, and that you'll make the preparations that need to be made, so that this trip, Lord, this experience will be an opportunity for people in Nepal to really see a God that is loving, that extends his love to us, his faith and his hope into our lives. So bless these guys, Lord. Bless the families. Bless our community here, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. I'd like to invite Pastor Trafford Fisher to join us at the front here. If you can put your hands together for Trafford, please. At Myland, we've been working through a series exploring the question on what on earth am I here for? And I guess that's a question that we ask at some point or another in our lives. And Pastor Trafford's going to be sharing a little bit about that this morning, and so we're looking forward to that.
Thank you, Daniel.
For those of you perhaps that don't know Pastor Trafford, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, maybe some of the things that you enjoy doing when you're not pastoring as such?
First up, Daniel, I'm not famous.
By my wife's, by my daughter's
by
standards.
your daughter's stand, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It'd be worried if a bloke was known as pretty. That would worry me. I live over at Normanhurst near Runga, and Carol, my wife, is here. And we're in charge of family ministries for the South Pacific Division of the Adventist Church. So it's all Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands. So, cover a bit of territory, but it's a blast. It's so much fun.
Now, your family, what's that made up of? Obviously, we have your wife here,
Yep.
which is fantastic. Thank you for coming along today.
There's one wife.
It's good.
And then we have two adult kids. We've got a daughter who's married and have two little grandies, two little daughters. And our daughter Kelly married Corey, and he is head of HR at the SPD as well, the head office, so we see him every day. They just live 6 minutes through the bush, so it's lovely to have them close. And my son is a parole and probation officer up on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, so he meets some interesting people, and he's engaged, getting married this year, so looking forward to that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Grandkids on the way.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is it about family that excites you? What is it that grabs you, the whole family
I grew up
thing?
in one, Daniel.
Good stuff.
I grew up in this family, had this neat mum and dad and 3 brothers. And when I was growing up, there was sort of 3 of us boys very close. And then when I was 16, so 16, my mum announced that she was pregnant, which was pretty tricky when you're a 16-year-old bloke. That's pretty off. So mum would walk that side of the street. So mum would walk that side of the street, us boys would walk that side, she wanted a pregnant mum. And but it was really cool because just fabulous memories of growing up on this little massive farm, 5 acres, and it was not far from the river, and it was out in the country, and it was just this tremendous memories of growing up in families. And then Carol's family had a fascinating journey. She came from a family where there were 5 kids, and they lived in a caravan way out central West Queensland. Their family was just so fascinating, kind of childhood days where they were just by themselves way out in the country. And so families are just so diverse and just intriguing, and being a part of a family, feeling that connection. Sadly, though, in our society now, we might mention today, certainly this afternoon, one of the biggest challenges for families now is the change in families. When I was a kid, if someone said to me, describe family, I would have said mum, dad and 2.5 kids. Pity about the 0.5, but anyway, that was sort of the definition of family. Now in Australia, mum, dad and 2.5 kids is the minority of families. So when we talk about family today, we have just such diverse kinds of families, and we have lap couples and single parent families and blended families, and it's fabulous. We're all in there together having a crack at this stuff, and I think it's just great to be a part of that journey. It's exciting.
Fantastic. Now, just quickly, just jumping ahead for a moment, you mentioned this afternoon.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We've been invited to look at how do we kind of raise a spiritually minded family, a healthy family. There's some really fascinating studies, Daniel, on healthy families. What are the things that make up healthy families? And interestingly enough, one of the characteristics of healthy families right across studies, international studies, is that successful and healthy families share a common religious core. Now, that may not be Christianity, but they share this common religious core. So we need to unpack that a bit and have a look at that. So you're going to have some fun.
So that's at 3 p.m. this afternoon.
3 o'clock.
And thank you so much for coming out here.
Pleasure.
Don't stress, we normally finish about 1:30, so if you can finish by 1 today.
All right, that'll be a good start.
It'd be great. So,
good on you, Daniel.
All yours.
Thank
God
you.
bless.
God bless. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, and just lovely to be with you. This is our 3rd visit, I think, to Myland, and it's just great to be here, to see some friends from the old days. Just so lovely to catch up with Warren and Greg and Viv and some other guys who have been a part of our family lives, and Nick and Glenn and all the guys. Thank you. Just lovely to see you all. Terrific. Yes, we're looking at a theme that you as a church, I understand, have been looking at for a while, and that is the call to serve. And it's just, it's part of who we are. So we need to have a look at that this morning. And you've been looking at Rick Warren's book, I understand, 40 Days of Purpose. Fabulous book. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. It's just terrific. And let's just put a few things together that Rick Warren says, and we know straight away we're created to serve God. And this is kind of part B this morning for those who are here in the first half when our discussion group looked at this. And I guess this is a kind of a part B. And the Ephesians 2:10 reminds us God has created us for a life of good deeds which he has already prepared for us to do. It's just core of who we are. So we were created to serve God, and the second thing is we were created to serve others. And I love that little picture of this little boy sitting in a wheelchair where someone's giving him a hand, putting a baseball bat in his hand. Give, and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down and shaken together and running over. Charmaine has shared with us a fabulous gift of music, and kind of she served us and she ministered to us through her music. Thank you, Charmaine, absolutely fabulous. I was going to break into song, but it's okay. Give, and it shall be given unto you. It's key. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Rick Warren says this, he refers to this text, it is God himself who has made us what we are and given us new lives from Christ Jesus, and long ago he planned that we should spend these lives in helping others. Long ago that was his plan, that we should spend it helping others. And this is Rick's statement. I thought it was good. He says, he refers to the text, you can tell what they are by what they do. By their fruits you shall know them, the old version. It says this, the world defines greatness in terms of power, possessions, prestige and position. If you can demand service from others, you've arrived. In our self-serving culture with its me-first mentality, acting like a servant is not a popular concept. Now, men, we've got a problem here, and it's fabulous to see all the men standing here for the Fly and Build. Congratulations, and I wish you well. And that's really important. I'll tell you why. Research suggests to us that we as men are a little different to our ladies. They did this fascinating experiment over a period of time where they invited ladies and men to choose words that they'd like to have describe themselves. Women inevitably chose relational kind of words. Love and family and connections with people. That's what the ladies chose generally. Men, do you know what we chose, men? The experiment showed that men chose things like power, prestige and things. Women are defined generally by relationships, men are defined by things. The tragedy for men is that 85% of men still find their definition of who they are in their work. You watch a bunch of blokes get together. What do you do for a job? It's one of the first questions we ask. Ladies don't generally tend to ask that. They tell me about your family. Women are much more relational. So guys, we're at risk here because we define greatness. We define, in fact, who we are in terms of power, possessions and things. And the Christian teachings of Jesus come along and says, no, switch that. And think about others. I love this statement by Einstein where he says, only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile. And Gerald Ford said to me, success is not something to be measured in power or fortune or fame. I believe a life of service to others is a successful life. And then Anne Frank, who has this fabulous statement, how wonderful is it nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. Love that. Barbara Bush, bless her, said giving frees us from the familiar territory of our own needs by opening our mind to the unexplained worlds occupied by the needs of others. Edmund Burke, nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. And this statement by Marion Edelman, service is the rent we pay to be living. It is the very purpose of life and not something you do in your spare time. It's a part of who we are. Martin Luther King Jr. has this fabulous statement as well. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. Isn't that great? That's what it's about. It's core to who we are. It's innate. I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know. The only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. Susanna Wesley was one of 25 children. In fact, she was the last of 24 children. She was born into this religious, interested family. Her dad, in fact, was a pastor. And so she got to know a lot of interesting people, including a young single pastor who came along to the family. They fell in love, got married. They went to a little town called Epworth in London, and there they ministered for, I think something like 40 years. They themselves had 19 children, 10 of who've survived. And one day there was a fire in the rectory, and the children ran outside and they started to do a roll call, which you have to do when you've got 10 kids, and they found that one was missing, and it was 6-year-old Charles. And they quickly looked up to a window, and there he was crying out in the window, and a man stood on another man's shoulders and just got him down just as the roof fell in. And John Wesley said he was the brand plucked from the burning. And he made a fascinating statement. He said this: do all the good you can by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can. Don't you love it? Love it. John Wesley went on to be a huge change in English religious history along with his brother Charles. Do all you can by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, to all the people. Love that. Rick Warren said great opportunities often disguise themselves in small tasks. And when you men go out there to Nepal, it may not be a massive task, a lot of small ones, but you'll make a huge change. If you think you're too important to help someone in need, it says in Galatians, you're only fooling yourself, you're really a nobody. Puts it fairly plainly. And Mahatma Gandhi, who I admire and I love the book about his life, said the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And there's a little ad on the moment on TV about, I think it's about banks charging too much money. And this guy says, I'm going off to find myself. It's a bit of a send-up. I'm going off to find myself. A lot of people in society looking for themselves. I think they're looking in the wrong place. You find yourself when you serve others. Well, there's some good news this morning because serving others can do something for our health. And I want to share this with you. It says, kinder people live longer, healthier lives. Yay! Check this out. People who volunteer tend to experience fewer aches and pains. Go to Nepal. Giving help to others protects overall health twice as much as aspirin protects heart disease. Okay? People 55 and older, now there's a couple of you here, Greg, 55 and older who volunteer for 2 or more organisations have an impressive 44% lower likelihood of dying. And that's after sifting out every other contributing factor, including physical health, exercise, gender, habits like smoking, marital status, and many more. This is a stronger effect than exercising 4 times a week or going to church. It means that volunteering is nearly as beneficial to health as quitting smoking. Good news? So all of you who are troubling with smoking, just go volunteering. Okay, there it is. Fascinating. See, there's a whole area of research out there at the moment. Serious. This is exciting stuff. Let me just give you a little bit of background here. For years, psychologists looked largely at negative stuff. Depression, suicide, anxiety. That was all good. But Martin Seligman was elected the president of the American Psychological Association some years ago. And in his inaugural speech, he challenged these psychologists. He said, let's start looking at positive things. Let's start looking at the things that count. He said, we know nothing about courage, faith, hope. And it's interesting, psychology, just this massive switch. And you can go to research articles now in the area of psychology and find all sorts of intriguing studies on some of these areas. In fact, let me share with you something interesting. I took a talk recently on this area called positive psychology, but he says that the research is discovering that all the things that you and I as Christian people who share a community of faith, the things that have been a part of our lives for years, faith, hope, courage, prayer, church attendance, they are discovering that all of those are powerful buffers against mental illness. How cool is that? Gratitude, showing gratitude has a huge, profound effect on mental health. They did some interesting research where they compared people who kept a gratitude journal once a week and those who didn't, or those who kept a journal of all the things that people upset them for. Oh, he made me mad, and he drove in front of me and he ripped me off, and they kept the record. And other people said, I'm so grateful for this. The difference in health was huge. So the things that we've taken for granted for years, we didn't know, but they were buffers against mental illness. Yeah, it's exciting. And this is one of them. Here, check this one. We feel so good when we give because we get what researchers call a helper's high, or a distinct physical sensation associated with helping. About half of participants in one study report that they feel stronger and more energetic after helping others. Many also reported feeling calmer and less depressed, with increased feelings of self-worth. See, we were designed to do this stuff. This is probably a literal high similar to a drug-induced high. For example, the act of making a financial donation, did you do your offering this morning? Triggers the reward centre in our brains that are responsible for dopamine-mediated euphoria. I just watched you as you put your offering in. Yay! No, serious. Oxytocin. I want to share with you something. Brain research is growing huge. We're going to make a few comments about it this afternoon, but it's really exciting. The research into our brains is just growing exponentially. And I want to refer you to a study this afternoon called Hardwired to Connect. But just quickly, they were concerned about anxiety, depression, suicide in young people in the US. So they got 33 professional people and said, we want some answers. And they were brain surgeons and neuro specialists and youth workers and psychologists. This wasn't a church-based study. It was a mental health department who set it up. And they came back with some incredible results. fascinating findings. I'm going to share again a bit more this afternoon, but one of the things they said was that the neuro brain specialist said that you and I are designed to connect. Our brain is designed to connect with another brain. Think for a moment in the words of God in Genesis. It is not good that man should be alone, because research shows loneliness can literally break your heart. In fact, James Lynch put a book several years now, it's quite a few years old, but it's still, the research is being supported. He said that every cause of death is in some way associated with loneliness. He said loneliness can literally break your heart. There's actually a name based on a Japanese man who discovered it for a syndrome that's associated with loneliness. You and I weren't designed to be alone. Some of you some years back might have seen a fascinating little thing that was going around the email, the internet world. Showed two little preemie twins born to a mum in America. And they did what the hospital always did. They separated these twins and put one in this little cot and one in this little cot. Which is interesting because they've been together 9 months growing, but they separate them out. One little twin started to do really well. All the evidence was that she was on target. The other one, not so good. And this nurse got sharp and against hospital policy. And she put the twins back together again. And the picture shows the healthy little twin puts her shoulder, this tiny little arm, and puts her arm over the other little twin and hugged her. And the little twin who wasn't doing so well, the heart, she calmed, the temperature dropped, and a few weeks later they both went home together. Now it's just one of the things, but seriously, we're not designed to be alone. Research is clear as a bell. You and I are designed to connect. One of the tragedies of our society is that we've lost connections. A young Japanese boy died some years back. He'd been at his computer for 5 days straight. Just playing computer games, hadn't stopped for food. So we've got Facebook. Hundreds of friends on Facebook. The research is showing that they're not there when you need them. I've got all these friends. We're designed to connect. What you're doing here today is powerful for your mental health. Okay. And when we serve, I'm convinced that same thing is happening. The research is showing us. Let's have a look at this one. Volunteer work substantially reduces symptoms of depression. Both helping others and receiving help is associated with lowered anxiety and depression. This may be especially true for kids, according to research. Adolescents who identify their primary motive as helping others are 3 times happier than those who lack such altruistic motivation. Similarly, teens who are giving are also happier and more active, involved, excited and engaged than their less engaged counterparts. So teens out there, look for some way you can get involved in the community. Look for some way of doing something. And you're going to... Generous behaviour reduces adolescent depression and suicide risk, and several studies have shown that teenagers who volunteer are less likely to fail a subject in school, get pregnant or abuse substances. Teens who volunteer also tend to be more socially competent, have higher self-esteem. That's what we want for our kids. Experiments have actually demonstrated again and again that kindness towards others actually causes us. It has a causal effect. To be happier improves our health and lengthens our lives. A clergyman was walking down the road and it was a really hot day and he looked up and noticed this young man sweating in the heat, furiously loading on hay that had come off an old wagon. And obviously this hay had fallen off the wagon and he was furiously putting it back on the wagon. Hot. And so this clergyman, a kind of heart clergyman, called out to him as he walked past. He said, "Son," he said, "stop, slow down. Here, come over here and share a drink. Just sit down and rest a while. You're working too hard." And this young man called. He says, "Well, my father wouldn't like it." And the clergyman was a bit surprised. He says, No, come on. Your dad won't mind. You come and rest here under the shade. Sit under the tree with me and have a drink for a while and rest." And again the young man said, "No, my father wouldn't like it." Well, the clergyman's a little upset. And he says, "Your father is a very harsh man. Tell me where he is so I can share with him a few reflections that I have on my mind. And the young man said, he's under the load of hay. I'm convinced people that families are under a load, and it isn't hay. Just last year I spent a week with world leaders, family ministry leaders like myself from every area of the world. We got together for a week, and every one of them lamented this or shared the struggle they would have with families that are kind of just breaking down. One of the greatest challenges in our society is families under stress. Families are stressed. Just recently I did a study in South Australia. It says families are stressed. When we ran a stall in front of supermarkets, shopping centres and on-street corners to ask South Australian families about stress, hundreds stopped to talk. Every family spoke about the multiple stresses they live with: time, money, relationships, kids' behaviour, housework, health and school made the top of the list. Statistics tell us that 91% of Australians are stressed by at least one area of their life. A pile-up of internal and external stresses can overwhelm the family, heightening vulnerability and the risk of subsequent problems. These stresses can derail the functioning of a family system with ripple effects to all members and their relationships. So we've got this sort of ongoing pile-up of stress. But notice this. Every family we met experienced chaos and stress, yet some families were still moving towards the lives they wanted. In our words, they were thriving. And this is what they discovered. Thriving families tried new things, set goals for the future, brokered family members to new opportunities outside the house, and gave and received positive feedback. Isn't it interesting? Thriving families brokered family members to new opportunities outside the house. People, I'm convinced that's speaking about doing something for somebody else. Because it's innate, it's a part of who we are. God has designed us to connect. It has special effects for kids that we've already looked at. From when they first begin to walk and talk and become truly cultural beings, young human children are naturally cooperative and helpful in many, though obviously not all, situations, and they do not get this from adults. It comes naturally. They have an almost reflexive desire to help, inform and share, and they do so without expectation or desire for reward. Again, it seems to be just a part of who we are. We're designed to reach out, put our arm around another soul. There's a very interesting study that they did on transferring faith, and that's particularly where we want to go this afternoon. I just want to share with you this interesting statement. This is by Mark DeVries, and he says this: parents who simply talk about their faith in the home and who involve their teens in serving alongside them can actually double and sometimes even triple their children's chances of living out their faith as adults. So we all want to take our kids to the journey that we have and take on the values that we treasure. We want to pass on the faith, give them the flag to carry on. One of the researchers, clear as a bell. Clear as a bell. Parents who talked about their faith but also got them to serve alongside them had double, even triple the chances of that happening. This whole thing of service just is all there. Just before we go there, can I just make one comment before, and I'm going to share with you a few things that research have suggested we can do together, and then we're done. They did an interesting experiment, and called it was the irreverent experiment. Because one of the challenges for us is, I don't have enough time. They got these university students, actually they were seminary students, they were at a theology training college, and they thought they'd do something interesting. So they called them into the room, and they said, today we want you to prepare a talk, a 5-minute talk, on 2 topics. One of them will be the story of the Good Samaritan, helping other people. So they set them aside time to do that, and they said, all right, all the ones who are talking on the Good Samaritan, if you can come over to this side of the room. They divided them into 3 groups. And they said, all right, we want you to walk from here. And they gave them instructions as to where to walk, where they'd be videoed for their talk. What they didn't know was that experiments got this old man with half shaven and looked pretty scruffy, gave him an old coat and a bottle of beer in a brown bag, and got him to lie on the footpath where all the men were going to walk to take their talk. They found something interesting. They said to the first group they invited through, in the first group they said, "You've got plenty of time, make your way over to the talk." And they sent them off. Then the next group said, "You're going to be a bit tight, but if you move at a reasonable pace, you should get there okay." They waited one. And the third group, they said, "You guys are running late. You've really got to get there." They found it very interesting that for those who are running late, none of them stopped at all, even though this old man groaned and fell over right in front of them. They actually had to step over him to go and take a talk on the Good Samaritan. See, time's a bit of a thing, isn't it? We're ready to help out when we've got time. But I'm convinced that when God comes back the second time and he asks the question, did you miss anything? Were you short on anything? And I'm convinced that all of us will say, if only we had more time. We're always looking for time, aren't we? Someone shared an interesting comment the other day. It was a bit about money. They said two things you've got to tell where to go, not ask where it's gone, and that's money and time. Don't ask where your money's gone, tell it where to go. Don't ask where your times go. Be in charge of time. We've all got the same amount of time. And the challenge is just using it. But we've read this morning, helping others isn't something we do in our spare time. It's a part of life. And our lives are designed to connect. Our world is a world of broken connections, right across the board. And we as Christian people to build the connections. Connect. They asked, one person asked a number of key leaders what they thought should families do together to serve. And here's just a few. Number one is model kindness yourself. Kindness be contagious. When we see someone else perform an act of kindness, we're more likely to feel an impulse to help out too. Research suggests that altruistic children have at least one parent, usually the same sex, who deliberately communicates altruistic values to their kids. That's helping others. Similarly, when preschoolers have nurturing caregivers who deliberately model helping others, they tend to be more helpful and verbally sympathetic to other children when they hurt themselves. Fascinating. So let's model kindness ourselves. Number two, get everybody personally responsible in some way. Help the whole family feel that the service activity is their project, not one you imposing on them. I've got this great idea, kids. It was nice, but what can we do, kids, together and get them involved? Let each person contribute ideas and help make final plans to activity. Children who often have great spontaneity and natural generosity can make a real contribution to your planning. And sometimes we think we've got to reinvent the wheel. And I've encouraged young people to work with, don't reinvent the wheel. Look in your society for what services to the community are already happening and go enjoy them and join them and empower them. Number three, don't reward helping behaviour. Ooh, it's interesting, but notice what this researcher says. Very young children who receive material rewards for helping others become less likely to help in the future, compared to toddlers who only receive verbal praise or receive no reward at all. This research suggests that even the youngest children are intrinsically motivated to be kind and that extrinsic rewards can undermine this tendency. Isn't that fascinating? So if we say, oh, good kid, that's lovely, no, and here's some lolly or here's some kind of reward, it suggests that the kid starts doing it for the reward. It's neat to remember that. Number four, be positive. Parents who express positive feelings and use positive, non-cursive discipline raise children who are kinder and more compassionate towards others. Number five, expose them to need. Too often we protect our kids from pain and suffering, and in so doing we shelter them from the other's needs. Consider the counterintuitive notion that compassion is a positive emotion strongly correlated with happiness, and provide them with opportunities to feel compassion. Teach kids that this compassion is a gift. It's a way to give their time, attention and energy to another. And the added bonus, when we expose kids to others' suffering, they often feel both compassion and gratitude. Some interesting research. Some years ago, we're finished. Some years ago, there was a group of us clergy, some pastors, youth workers who were going into a court case in Sydney at the courthouse, the main courthouse in Sydney. And there was a major drug case on, and we're going to go and watch this drug case. As we were going there, I remember very clearly in my mind, I can still see it, there was an old man lying on a bench seat in just beside Town Hall Station, for those you know in the city. And again, he was the typical image of the alcoholic man. He had the old coat and the unshaven face and the starey eyes, very distant. And I remember I was in my suit, tie. We were clergy, pastors, going off to a drug case, very important. And I stopped beside this old man and I said, "How you doing?" And he mumbled something that I forget. He wasn't very verbal. And so we walked on, went to the court case. Unfortunately, the drug case for that particular day was cancelled. We thought, we're here, so we may as well sit in for a while. They brought in a lady who'd been serving on the street, and she was brought in, and the judge turned to the prosecutor and said, "Any previous charges?" And he said, 54 previous charges, Your Honour. And he just rolled his eyes and banged his gavel and $20 fine or something, and she went back out on the street. And I remember clearly walking out of that courtroom and for a moment thinking, I've got my suit, I'm a pastor. Then it dawned on me really clearly that in God's eyes, the alcoholic man on the chair and the woman who had 54 previous charges was just as worthy as I was to be a son and daughter of God. They too were sons and daughters of God. They too were a part of God's family. They too were my brother and my sister. And the fabulous thing is that they're the ones that we care for together. They've broken connections as well. They're lonely. God invites us, no matter who we are, to reach out there and connect, and make a difference in people's lives. I love this final verse. Do you want to stand out? Then step down and be a servant. May God bless us as we continue to minister to people's lives.